Welcome to the Voices of Young People podcast, brought to you by Springtide Research Institute. In each episode, we hear directly from young people as they respond to our research and share about the issues impacting their lives. As sociologists and researchers, we see a new story unfolding for young people, one that moves beyond traditional institutional boundaries and requires careful attention to the inner and outer lives of emerging generations. At the intersection of being and becoming, it's the Voices of Young People.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Voices of Young People podcast. This is season 9. I'm your host, Marte Aboagye, the head of community engagement at Springtide. And in season 9, we've been talking all about politics, civic engagement. We're talking to different members of our Springtide Ambassadors program, which the shorthand of that is called SAP. And I have another two wonderful young people with us today that you'll get to hear from in just a moment, sharing about the people or the places where they've been influenced when it comes to civic engagement, what issues really matter to them, and what is their message when it comes to young people in politics. You'll hear all of that and more in our conversation today. So let's have them both introduce themselves. I'll have you go first, Gabriella.
Thank you, Marte. My name is Gabriella. I'm 18 and I live in the state of Washington. I'm very passionate about helping youth and pediatrics. I hope to work with pediatrics in some field eventually. And I identify as a Christian.
Awesome. I love that you're so committed to accompanying youth. And I've heard that in some of the jobs you've had, in your studies. Is there a particular age range when it comes to pediatrics that you're extra interested in?
I'm mostly interested in ages below 13, but I think as I get older and have more life experience, I'll be more equipped to work with teenagers.
Yeah, well, we love having you in the Springtide Ambassadors program, Gabriella, and it's been really fun to get to know you through conversations like this. So can't wait to hear what else you have to offer today. We'll have our next guest introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Mirelia. I'm 16 and I'm a junior in high school. I really like the arts, just like anything to do with arts. So I'm into musical theater. And one of my favorite outlets to go to is always poetry. I write so much poetry about like everything.
I love the way you're driven by the arts, Mirelia, and I learn new avenues of where your arts engagement happens in each conversation that we share. Theater, arts, poetry, that's really rad that all of them are under your belt. I'm really pleased to have you joining us today as well. So in today's conversation, you'll hear that we have a high school student, a college student, one, is able to actively vote. One can't quite yet, but they both have really important thoughts when it comes to politics and their own civic engagement. So with that, I want to know, what is the first thing you think of when you hear the word politics? Mirelia, what comes to mind for you as first impression?
So politics for me is all about interaction and the way that our opinions affect our interaction. A lot of times you'll hear anytime anyone brings up an opinion that's about the way that other people outside of them choose to live their lives, or the way that two nations choose to interact with each other, that is inherently political. And that is because we are having an opinion on someone else and how that person or group of people should react or interact with other people. I think the root of politics is all about opinions and the power that those opinions hold.
That really makes sense. What about civic care? Do you have any sort of different impression when it comes to that phrase?
Yeah, civic care, I think, is more about the way that we as a community need to build each other up and keep each other healthy, because not all the time is there or the government doesn't always do the best job at taking care of us as a group, because I'll get more into it later, but I think the government is so full of one type of person, that they can't possibly take care of different types of people. So as a community, we have to be able to take care of each other.
That's really cool. I like that communal approach of like, it's not just up to elected officials to take care of things, that this has to take a concerted effort from everyone in the community contributing. Love that. Okay, Gabriella, I'm curious to hear the same for you. When you hear politics, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Ooh, well, I really wish that I could say the same thing as Mirelia. Like what she said was on the dot, and that's what I want politics to be. Right now, though, I think when I think politics, the first things I envision are tension, diplomats, politicians, and lots of speeches. So I think that just the way politics has been portrayed, the way I've grown up, it's been very negative. Like the word itself has been negative. And I think what politics should convey is more what Mirelia brought up. But personally, the emotions that come with the word politics are more negative in connotation than positive.
I get that. And you're not alone. We hear that from a lot of different young people, that there's sort of some baggage that comes with the term politics. Like you said, a negative association. What about the term civic care? Does that have any different impression on you?
Civic care does sound more optimistic. So when I heard for the first time, when I heard the phrase civic care, I imagined engagement, active listening, passionate dreamers, idealists and practicalists all collaborating on appointing and supporting and even becoming leaders. So yes, I think the term civic care, like Mirelia said, is about bringing together the people to take care of the people and not just some upper authority coming down to care for us necessarily.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, what you both hinted at already in those quick impressions with both terms is really why we decided to call this year's report Cultivating Care, because we felt like just calling it politics didn't actually capture all the things we heard from young people ages 13 to 25 in our qualitative and quantitative research, that some of the sentiments you both were already getting at was really, where are young people invested and how do they want to see change in their communities? And the term politics will still come up in our conversations today for sure, but we also want to know about the ways that you're engaging civically, or what issues you care about. So on that note, do you consider yourself to be someone that is civically engaged?
I think I am civically engaged to the point where I at least have an idea of what's happening, enough of an idea to where I can pull from whatever different sides and formulate my own opinion. And I also do like to have discussions with like my friends, and we get pretty in depth with our discussions. That's why I love my friend group that I have so much, is we can, even if we don't necessarily agree, which most of the time we do agree, but even if we don't, we're always able to add nuance to those discussions, because I feel like a lot of times it's very much you have to be one side or the other. You can't have nuance. And I think I personally am someone who likes to have that nuance and to be engaged in at least conversing with other people about it.
Yeah, that's great. I think the key thing Mirelia mentioned is being able to have conversations. And honestly, I seek to have more conversations, not just with my friends, but with other people like grandparents, parents, teachers, professors, all of that. So right now I'm trying to read and research what I'm learning about in school. School has, especially college, has opened up a lot more different topics that I hadn't particularly thought of in the past. And it's just so much to think about. So I think what's difficult for me when I'm being civically engaged is to choose what to really dive into and what topics to think, yes, this is important, but I can't learn everything. So perhaps I won't study this as in depth as another issue, for instance. So it all starts with having good conversations and honestly talking to people more than just reading some abstract book or trying to sift through the internet.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic that you both really care about having these meaningful conversations with people that you both said that you might not always agree with, or that are people from different stages of life, peers as well as other trusted adults. So I want to hear more later on how those intergenerational conversations play out. But I first want to know if there's a social or a political issue that you especially care about. What is it? And when did you start caring about it? And do you feel like this issue matters to other people in your life?
As I said earlier, passionate about working with youth. And with that comes family and adoption. So I'm very passionate about adoption, both international adoption, domestic adoption, and all care related to orphan children, vulnerable families, etc. I think this just grew out of interest for international issues when I was younger. And because of this, and because I love working with children, I've always thought adoption sounded like a cool topic. And as I got into senior and junior year, I had the opportunity at my school to write a whole thesis about any topic I wanted to, as long as it was a difficult topic to cover. So I chose to talk about international adoption, particularly of disabled children, and how sometimes taking children from where they've grown up or their relatives to a different culture and country with different language is not necessarily the best way of helping children grow. And therefore, because I started realizing this and like, oh, we need to do more about helping children grow up in the families they're born into, empowering both parents to raise a stable home, then I saw like what parts of America's foster system are falling apart. So I believe in helping troubleshoot our foster system, specifically in America, so that we can have kids raised in a fully parented household, good role models of adults, trusted mentors, especially mentors they can turn to for help. And because I said I'm a Christian, I'm really passionate about orphans, because there's even a verse in the Bible that says like pure undefiled religion is including visiting orphans and widows in their trouble. So what better reason is there for me, especially to aid orphans or orphan children, than to practice a pure religion or to honor God and then, of course, help other people?
That's wonderful. So many needs in the foster care system across the U.S., as well as domestic and international adoption. I love that that's such a through line passion for you, that even in high school, you were thinking critically about this, writing papers about it, um, discussing it, and that it's informed in a lot of ways what you even want to do career wise in terms of supporting youth and young people.
Yeah, so what I am very passionate about is civil rights, just in general, racially, gender wise, with the LGBTQ community, which I am a part of. Because I've always been very different growing up, I would get made fun of for just being different, even though there were certain parts of my identity that I didn't even know that existed yet that were different. So that has always been very close to home with me as a part of multiple minority groups that had a history of not always having rights. And I see that we are making a lot of progress today, but there's still a lot of progress to be made with that. Um, I, my parents and my friends both have like views as like, yeah, civil rights are good, right? But because my parents are very, very religious, not saying all religious people are like that, they have different beliefs on what minority groups are valid versus aren't, and what different groups should be supported or should be like, I don't know, try to take away that part of their identity in a sense. My friends, for the most part, I agree with them on most things, but some of them I still disagree with. But I still love having those conversations with like whoever about it. Um, But yeah, civil rights has always been like a big, big thing for me. Like inherently, it was inside me since I was a very, very young child. Just like knowing that there was something wrong with treating people with less dignity because they were different.
Thank you, Mirelia. Yeah, queer civil rights. I've heard you mention that even before today's conversation, but I love the ways that your own identity is connected to this passion and this pursuit that you're discussing with family and friends, and really holding to your convictions. I would love to know, do you think it's important for people to be civically engaged, whether that is voting or activism or volunteering in their community?
I think it's absolutely super duper important to be civically engaged. I think it's very easy to remain ignorant on those issues. And sometimes people want to because they don't want to be attacked by either side for not agreeing. But I think that ignorance can be very dangerous. And it's our job that to remain educated, and that if we believe in something that we have to fight for it, because that's the only way that we've ever made progress in the world is by seeing an issue and by dealing with it as a group of people. There is no other way that our society could have come as far as it has come today. And because it still has such a long way to go, we need to continue that fight. I think activism and speaking out are the most important ways for people, especially young people like me who maybe can't vote yet, to get politically involved, is to get educated, stay educated, and help other people to be educated in these issues.
Thank you for sharing, Mirelia. I think it's important for us to volunteer because the best leaders are those who lead through service. And of course, the more we serve, also the more we learn. And the more we learn, the more we're leading, the more we're also learning what other people need through our service and through our leadership and serving. And we're encouraging other people to act that way as well. Voters are taking responsibility to understand their communities. So I think they need to definitely be involved in their communities and understand the laws and plans that they're supporting and the laws and plans that they don't support. So they're understanding what choices they're being made.
We talked to so many different young people, over 80 interviews we did in our qualitative research for the State of Religion and Young People 2024. This year's report focused on civic care, civic engagement. And we can't even fit all those, quotes from these interviews into the report. There's so many important ideas that come up in these conversations. But I want to highlight a quote right now that came from someone who we're calling May, because all of these quotes have pseudonyms from the research interviews. But May, age 21, had this to say: I think that young people hold more power than they realize. We are the ones who are going to inherit the nation, like it or not. And that means we need to be active about being involved in our nation's policies, about educating ourselves on what matters to not just us, but other demographics as well. And we need to do a better job of being engaged. And not just engaged, but being engaged in a nuanced way. And that's what healthy discourse looks like. What are the things that we value? Why do we value these things? And how do we differ from youth around the world? What kind of cooperation can we work towards? Like, what are these goals that we have? What are the values these goals stem from? And what are things that we can compromise on? What are things that we can't? And therefore be able to say, this is kind of like the direction that we want the nation to go in. This is how we work towards that, whether as individuals or as a community. So lots of good stuff that you could reflect on in that excerpt from May's research interview. But I'm wondering, if any certain thoughts stand out to you. Almost like there's a third young person in the conversation now. What what sort of input would you want to offer?
In her quote, she makes a comment that we need to be asking these deeper questions so that we are more engaged. And that's what keyed me into this quote when I listened to it. So, for example, I really like questions such as, what are things we value? Why do we value these things? How do we differ from other youth around the world? And then furthermore, I think I'd also ask questions like, what is truth? What is ultimate truth? What will we compromise on or not compromise on individually as society? What would compromise our ethical codes or force others to compromise their ethical codes? Would these be worth it or not? What is wrong? And even if things do not seem to harm others, what and why are these things still wrong? And then, of course, what is the greater hope? What's the greater goal for our society? Is there a promise of eternity? And how would that affect how we live our everyday life? And finally, what is our standard for society? And how are we making steps toward this higher standard for society?
I really liked her comment about being engaged in a nuanced way, and that how that's healthy discourse. I think that nuance is such an important thing. And I think especially with like globalization and the internet, I feel like I'll get more into this later, but I feel like we're pulling more towards polar opposite sides, and that nuance is something that we need so much. I think it's the one thing that could save our world if it's gonna go down the gutter. I think nuance is just something we need more of in the world. I think we need to look at everything with nuance because there is no black and white in this world. There's so much color and there's so much variety in everything. And there's so many different sides to every story. Every single thing that goes on has nuance. And we need to look at that and see it for everything that it is and not just one side.
I'm curious, who and or what have been the greatest influences on you politically? Are they certain people in your life? Are there certain groups or public figures or writers? Anything you want to offer that has impacted your political views or your political beliefs and values?
So I think when I was younger, my parents were really the only people that I heard talk about politics, and they talked to me about it in a very like one-sided way, which I mean, I was a child, but it wasn't very beneficial to me to only hear about politics from them. And also I was growing up in the Catholic Church, so I also inherited a lot of the Catholic Church's values. But as I grew up older, discovering more about myself, and then also because I went to Catholic school, learning about what kind of other values that I hadn't heard of the church had, it made me kind of want to grow away from that being my only source of political information because I could see that it was very biased. And that's fine. Everyone has a bias, but I wanted to hear more about different sides of the conversation. So as I grew older, especially in high school, I started really thinking more about it on my own. So I think a lot of where I got my value was just from myself, looking at myself and what kind of person I am and what kind of person I want to be and what I want to see in the world, which sounds selfish, but that's how I thought of it. And also having those conversations with my peers, I got a lot more friends in high school and also having a lot more access to the internet. And I hate saying that the internet is how I got my political views because I feel like a lot of older people don't see having the internet as a source of your politics be a good thing, but it did help me. And I don't know, it was a lot of just like being on my own and thinking things over.
So for me, I also grew up under a certain worldview. And as I got older, especially in middle school and high school, you start to question more things like why? And I think that's very good to question, like why things are, why is this true? And then why is the reason this is true, make it true. And ultimately, if you trace that rabbit trail all the way back, you realize that you have to take a stance somewhere. You have to choose an ultimate worldview somewhere. And because I'm a Christian and I had to decide, like, well, if I'm going to believe God exists and I'm going to believe any of this, I have to choose some ultimate thing I'm going to trust, or all my beliefs are going to fall apart eventually. So I decided, just like, okay, I'll just believe that God exists. I believe in Christ and I believe in the Bible. And so those things, I would say, are what I use as my ultimate roots of how I govern ethics and politics and etc. But I can't be trusted to just interpret, say, the Bible on my own, or just trust one pastor or I guess my parents to interpret politics correctly. Because as Mirelia said, we all have our own biases and we're all prone to be biased toward our own desires. And I don't want that. So that's why I try to get, as much as I can, a good variety of people who are mostly, say, rooted in the same ultimate truths that I am, but at the same time, people who are outside of that, so I can engage with those ideas. And what really helped me was I read a book by a woman named Nancy Pearcey, and she said to analyze every idea by, like, what was this idea's creation? How did it begin? Where did it come from? Then what was the idea's fall? What went wrong? And what was the source of the certain evil or suffering in, say, an issue? And then what is this viewpoint, say, the redemption should be for this issue? Like, what can we do about it? How can it be set right? And then assess all those things back to some ultimate standard, like some ultimate ethical standard and Christianity for me. And assessing everything this way helps me work through different political issues, whether it be anything from immigration to issues about abortion to issues about families, etc., because I can assess every issue, like what was creation, its fall, its redemption, and what are the different political ideas saying about these things. And then when I interpret something, I can take it to, say, an elder or parent or teacher, professor, and talk to them about it. And then they can question me back and make sure I'm asking the right questions. And all of this, I understand. I'm never going to ultimately know what was the right nuanced truth in this way or that. But I do believe I'm trying to do the best I can. And I think that there is some ultimate grace for all of us. And I need to extend this grace on others.
Well, that last part actually lines up exactly what I want to talk about next. And that's whether you talk to people from older generations about politics. And if you do, what could that trusted adult do to make you feel like, hey, this is an open conversation to discuss political issues? Or are there telltale signs that someone is not taking you seriously or dismissing your ideas?
I think that when I talk to an older adult, I really appreciate when they're honest and they just admit if they don't know anything on the topic. I know that we all like to pretend that we know more than we do, and because we're so strongly rooted in whatever we believe is true and our ultimate truth is, that it can be hard for us to admit that we don't know what to do in a situation, that we're just going to give up this thing that we must press upon another person. But I think part of good conversation and humility in society is just to understand that we can't know everything on every issue. And that's why I listen to adults who admit, like, oh, I haven't actually researched much about this topic, but here's what I do know. And if they are actually reading a lot themselves, if they're patient, kind, and I see their wisdom and other choices, then I'm more prone to listen to them than, say, if they're just quick to speak, not quick to listen. And I think, like some other young adults have told me, if they're constantly cutting other people off in the middle with like such excited voices that it's hard to ask questions back or even want to listen.
Yeah, all of that makes a lot of sense. I hope people listening take away several of those pointers you made about intellectual curiosity, but also humility to say, I don't know. And then just that approachability that you were getting at as well, in terms of not interrupting, not dismissing someone. What would you want to add to that, Mirelia?
Yeah, so I do also talk to older people about politics. It's not always by my own will, because I don't really like talking to them about politics just because they tend to not really want to listen. Um, but I think the easiest thing that they can do is just sit and listen. Because a lot of times they are quiet, but they're still like thinking through like, oh, this person's wrong. They don't know what they're talking about just because I am younger than them. And so some telltale signs I think is that they are listening is I've had people say things, oh, like you've given me a lot to think about, or you have me questioning my beliefs now. Um, Literally just not interrupting me is also really easy. I think it takes way less energy to actually listen to someone and hear them out and hear their point. Because a lot of times when I'm making completely educated, fact-based points, they'll cut me off or they'll deny the proven facts that I brought up. Like I could Google something and pull it up to them right now, and they'll keep repeating their same argument over and over after I've already rebutted it. I think it just takes a lot less energy to just calm down and listen for a little bit. Even if you don't agree, at least listen to me and hear me out.
You're right that there's such a difference between listening to genuinely hear what someone has to say and listening so that you can make a rebuttal or make your own point. Like that's very different posture and approach. And young people know when someone is listening with authenticity versus when someone's just listening to debate. I would love to shift the conversation to talk about religion or spirituality a bit in tandem with how your sense of spirituality, religion, faith, your worldview, whatever resonates with you, how that shapes or impacts your politics.
So because I'm a Christian, in the Bible, there's a verse that says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so therefore I believe that it's not that people who don't believe in God are not like smart. Clearly there's lots of knowledgeable people out there who are not Christians, and I still respect their ideas and I believe they're saying good things. But I think there's a certain way of applying the knowledge that is distinctly coming from, say, a posture of fearing or respecting God or the higher power. And therefore, I think it's because there's an ethical standard that exists if you believe in God that you wouldn't have if you didn't, because then you know something's rooting all your reasons that you believe in morality. Like, why is this necessarily right? There's a reason for it, and this gives it power. So that's why I am shaped in my political thoughts by my religion. And also, I just love what the scripture says about, say, like civil rights in general. There's a verse in the Bible, I think it's coming out of one of the middle books, like the prophets, and it's talking about God complaining to people about how they're living. He's saying, like, is this the kind of fasting I have chosen to loose the chains of injustice? Because he's wanting them to loose the chains of injustice and untie, say, oppressive yokes and cords. He wants them to set the oppressed free and to break every yoke. He wants them to share their food with the hungry, to provide for poor people, to give them shelter, to clothe people, not turn away your own family, all of these things. And then he'll send them healing. So this is what the Bible is saying. But so often we like to say, oh, I'm self-righteous, I'm doing this and that, and I act all high and I have all this power. But that's not really what God wants. And it's all about helping injustice become fixed, helping the oppressed people find relief, helping the hungry people find food, just giving mercy and grace toward those who don't have it. And therefore all of this, and of course there's a verse that says to support orphan children and all of that in there too. All of this shapes my worldview to be more about showing mercy when I can, doing justice when I can, and then doing my best to be humble, which we all struggle with. But of course, being humble is the way that we learn best.
Yeah, so I am definitely not a religious person in the sense that, like, I don't believe in a God or any sort of divine scripture or anything. I don't belong to any organized religious group personally. Like I said earlier, I did grow up in the Catholic faith, but I don't agree with a lot of their stances. So I've since grown apart from that. Um, but I do believe that people have like a soul that needs to be taken care of, and it can be injured or scarred just in the same exact way that our physical bodies can be injured. And I think that we can see the nature of people's souls just through the way that they interact with others and just by paying extra attention to that. I like to have the most empathy possible in any situation. Even if someone's doing something that's hurting me, I like to always look less at the action and more at the reasoning behind it. Because everyone has a reason for everything they do, even if they don't know the reason. I always like to look deep down into them and see why people think the way they think, why people act the way they act. And because of the belief in souls that can be damaged and broken, I think that everyone has at least a little bit of damage to their soul. Um, I think that everyone does deserve to be treated with the utmost dignity and respect, because you never know what someone's going through or how hard it is for them. And I think that every single human in this world deserves to be treated in a way that they always know and feel loved, because that is something that just everyone needs inherently, even if it's not a romantic love. They just need to feel seen and heard and cared for.
Thank you both for such thoughtful answers. It's really cool for me to hear the ways that young people are connecting their own sense of spirituality to the ways they view the world and view people. And I heard empathy uplifted so much from both of your responses, and direct care and direct support. That's all goes along with this idea of civic engagement, civic care that you've already been discussing throughout the conversation. I am curious, do you feel more hopeful or fearful about the direction of society these days? And what makes you feel that way?
Personally, I'm finding myself more afraid, especially as I myself am learning more things in college that I had not seen before, or different viewpoints I haven't realized before, and how things can appear true or be twisted, and how things can seem straightforward or deeper than I believed. I'm also seeing how people are more and more complicated. I'd always known people are complicated, but as Mirelia has just shared, people have damaged souls, and this can affect the way they play out. And of course, if we have damaged souls, and we all have damaged souls, and if we're complicated, of course, our societal structures are going to reflect that. And that's a scary thought, that all our societal structures are reflecting what people are ultimately made of. And this does make me afraid. But at the same time, because of what Mirelia shared about how she as a young person is noticing, like, we all need to be loved and cared for. We all need to be recognized that we're all broken people. We have damage. We have a soul that needs to be cared for. Because people like Mirelia and myself, and I think others in our Springtide cohort, are seeing this, then I do have hope that amidst all the fear we have for society and amidst all the complicated systems, we are going to be able to rise above and learn how to care for each other. As a Christian, I have hope that the Christian community can step up and do a better job, that it can just live out simplistic hospitality and grace and justice for others, and that it can show other people what like a heaven on earth is supposed to be like. And that even if society does become harder and more complicated, more twisted and darker in certain areas, the more people will be able to find hope of heaven. And then the more we find hope of heaven in eternity, the more we can reflect this hope of heaven on earth.
Not singularly hopeful, but reason to feel both. What about you, Mirelia?
The thing that I'm most afraid of is the lack of nuance that I see society heading more towards. A lot of what I see in the world is you either have to be on this one side or you have to be on this other side. It's making things increasingly black and white, which is what we've fought so hard to get away from. So I think it's really scary that we're going back towards that. And I think that the way that people look at any given issue is without nuance, is without any sort of seeing every single angle and every bit and piece of everything that is happening. And the people in power, especially here in the US, I know other countries are doing a better job at having more diversity in their leadership. But up until very, very recently, the United States, everyone in power has been a cishet old white man. That's what it's been. And I see a little bit more diversity, but I'm still afraid because the governmental power structures are moving at such a slower pace than the rest of society is moving at. And I think that's going to be a problem because even though Gen Z is going to be the next people in power of the United States and of the world, and we have much more nuanced views. We like to look at things more nuanced. I feel like it's going to take a lot longer for us to get in power than we would like to think. I feel like we keep having the same candidates every year, and it's always only the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate that are highlighted. And we don't see any of the other parties in the debates or anything. So I would really like to highlight the voices of people from different political parties in the presidential debate and the presidential running. But seeing as it's been that way for so long and it's increasingly going to both extremes, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to have that, or at least not in the near future.
I hear that. I really hear that. Thank you for articulating so much of what you're hearing and seeing and your deep concerns for the direction of society. I have one last question for you both, and it is to hear what is your message that you think everyone should know about when it comes to young people and politics.
I can speak to what I want to see more in the world. I, as a young person, just want adults and older people to know that if, say, you show me you keep promises, you show me you're hospitable, I will believe what you have to say is going to be good for this country. Like, I've learned from adults how to disagree. I know how to argue. I know how to act discontent and angry. I know how to look important as a protester or a defender of some thesis. But I think it's harder for us to step off our soapboxes and say, teach the younger generation, or as me as younger generation, see in the older generation what it looks like to show hospitality, to keep promises, to value time with older, slower relatives. But honestly, doing these things will make society sweeter. And doing these things shows that there's no, say, split between what we see as facts that we must hold to in the general sphere, or we see as values that we're holding personally. It shows that our values are affecting how we interact with facts. What is fact? And I want to see a world where what we hold as our personal faiths are not just trapped in our private spheres, but they're shown to the world, and they're shown in just the little things of how do we act with our family or friends. So that's what I want the older generations to know, and that's what I want other people my age growing up to know, that that's very important. To communicate truth to others, to pass down our values to others, is less about, it is about getting on our soapboxes and speaking sometimes, but also it's not just about being loud and vociferous or whatever that word is, but it's also about just the little ways we conduct ourselves. Of course, our life is the best apologetic we can have, and having a quiet, peace-seeking life is one of the best apologetics you can have for passing on your values to younger generations.
So I mentioned earlier that I hesitate to say that the internet or the media is where I get a lot of my beliefs from, because I know especially older people tend to try to undermine young people, or especially young liberals who say that. But I don't think that they realize that on the internet, we have access to literally any viewpoint that there is to have. We have access to so many different points of view, and we have access to the far right, we have access to the far left, and we have access to anything in between if we want to. And we can pick and choose which of these ideologies we want to adopt. And we are equally as likely to come across conservative content and liberal content and look into both of them. And it's a choice that we are consciously making, knowing a variety of different messages and having all of them in mind. So I think them seeing as, or like our leanings more towards being more progressive in Generation Z, they see it a lot as, oh, it's the media poisoning them or something. But it's really just us seeing that there is a place for change in the world, and that the world needs that change. And I don't think they quite understand that the world is changing and that we are actively choosing to be a part of that change because we see the necessity for it. I think they see it more as of literally just like we are like robots. We stand there and whatever information that people plug in is what our ideologies are going to be. And it's much more complex than that.
Thank you so much for your thoughtfulness, your willingness to share some of these passions and influence when it comes to your political engagement. I love knowing that we have high school students and college students like you both that are thinking deeply and wanting to have a real impact in your own communities, in your own settings, and thinking about broader national issues and conversations as well. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you, Mirelia, and thank you, Gabriella.
Visit springtideresearch.org to hear more voices of young people and to learn about the latest research and resources available, along with Cultivating Care, how and why young people participate in civic life. Springtide Research Institute is dedicated to listening to young people and sharing critical research and actionable insights from what we learn. Visit our website to find ways to support our work and discover ways that we can support yours. You can find us and follow us on social media at We Are Springtide. If you're enjoying the Voices of Young People podcast, we invite you to rate it, review it, and share it with a friend. Today's show was produced by Marte Aboagye. Audio was mixed by Andy Palmer. Opening description from Fardosa Dahir. And original music by Christian Unthank. Special thanks to the 12 guests featured in Season 9 and to all the young people whose perspectives and insights make our research possible. Thanks for listening.